Formula One is back, and damn what a race that was to return with. Formula One returned with the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend. We have another Austrian Grand Prix, the Styrian Grand Prix. Very excited about. We have rain predicted. It's looking like it's going to be as exciting as this one was. But I wanted to come in now, midweek roundup, kind of what happened last weekend at the race, kind of what we learned from the cars. Just open a discussion point, really, kind of have my say and my opinion about some things. And if you fancy leaving a comment down below and interacting and engaging with me, please do. I would absolutely love that. Something that actually caused me a little bit of concern as of Saturday evening, which was Mercedes. Now, their pace was incredibly dominant during qualifying. I think at one point they were 8 tenths up on the Red Bulls, which was just insane. And I was really worried about the race and how dominant they were going to be, and if they were just going to walk away with the whole thing, which would have been real snooze fest. But Red Bull did try something different with Max Verstappen, with starting on the medium compounded tyre rather than the soft. I'm really upset that Verstappen did end up retiring, because I really think that could have been an awesome mix-up. We could have had a really cool battle between the top three there to see how that strategy was going to play off for him. Before I go any further, let's talk about how many cars fell off the grid. I don't think I've ever seen a race where so many cars have dropped off. I think the cars we lost were all for technical failures or mechanical issues, there wasn't really any crashing. There was crashing, but not so much that took people out the race, which was surprising for me, because I genuinely thought, honestly, that would be something that we were contending with, because all of the drivers have been racing, and if they've been racing, they've been esports racing, which is very different. No real danger, no real risk, because if you spin it, then you're not going to hurt yourself, you're not going to damage a real car, you're not going to spend any money on fixing it, just lose yourself some time and possibly lose yourself an esports race. So the risk is not as high, which is what I just expected, because the drivers would kind of get used to that no risk factor, if you will, that they would have been a bit more gunsy, a bit more ballsy going into the first corner. And I genuinely said prior to the race that at least three cars would be lost going into T1. I was genuinely shocked by how many we lost. One more and Latifi would have had a point, which would have been awesome for Williams. Speaking of Williams, it was so close to Russell getting into Q2, which would have been awesome. The team have done a really good job, I think, to get ready to come back to racing and kind of take a step up. I don't think we're going to see them much higher than the bottom of the grid, which I recall saying in my F1 testing video, which if you haven't seen, go check that out, because that was fun. It was the last time I was at a racetrack, which was February. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see them at the back, but it was a good sign to see them doing well and looking racy, looking fast, and looking like they got a bit of competition. I think he actually made a mistake. Russell, he made a mistake in his quali lap. He had a little twitch coming through one of the corners, and that cost him 0.07, which lost him a Q2 appearance. So hopefully this weekend he can be a bit tidier, because it would be really good to see them get a Q2 appearance. I think it would be great morale for the team, and you'd see that step that they've done. And I do think they've done a step, and obviously the team at the moment is in a bit of a sticky spot and is in a bit of a grey area in the future on what happens next. So it would be really, really good to see them in not maybe a super strong position, but in a stronger position than they were last year. The race in itself, I think until the last 15 laps, was actually quite dull. When Verstappen fell off, it was definitely a Mercedes one to run away. No one really put the pressure on them at all. We don't know what's going on with Ferrari at the moment, but they really need to find a solution, and fast. They have brought forward, so they were not going to bring any updates until Hungary, but they have brought that forwards now to this weekend. So hopefully we can see them a little bit more punchy, a little bit more closer to the front for a bit of a better fight. But because at the moment they're happily sitting behind McLaren and Racing Point in race pace. And I think Leclerc's second place, admittedly by them, was very much a bit of a fluke, a very lucky circumstances. It was a very chaotic race towards the end anyway. So yeah, I think in that respect, it was very, very lucky podium. And they know that wasn't on straight pace, so they know they still have work to do. Let's talk about the awesome factor. Good old little McLaren there, showing a pretty decent streak. Now, I think the team has been pretty honest about the fact that they don't believe that was relative pace. There was a lot of circumstances there that was lucky for them and played into their favour. Example, Hamilton getting that 5-second penalty that promoted Norris up, and I'm not taking anything away from Norris because he did a smashing final lap to close that gap from, I think it was like 5.4, to close that down to 4 point, whatever it was, 4.7, 4.9 at the end, to make sure he was actually promoted onto the podium. So I'm not taking anything away from him, but I think the team know that that isn't relative pace. That's not where they normally are. 2 Red Bulls weren't there that should have been there, and that instantly drops them down to 5th on relative pace. Really good to see them beat Racing Point though. That is going to be the fight to watch this year, I think. It's going to be a really tight midfield battle. It's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. I got to talk about as well the DRS activation areas, or sorry, the DRS sections at Austria. It's a very short circuit anyway. I think it's, well, with Monaco now not on the calendar this year, it is, I believe, the shortest circuit on the calendar. It's only got 9 corners. I don't know why there are 3 zones. The middle DRS zone makes overtaking so easy. I don't know why it's there. I don't think it should be there. I think it should be gone. I think it should only be 2. DRS at the end of the day is supposed to aid drivers, put them in a closer position so when they get to the braking zone, they're in a place where they can overtake. Not to make overtaking super easy, that you don't even have to wait for the braking zone and you're getting them on a straight, even though you may not actually be faster than the car anyway. I think one of the biggest questions going into the weekend was Mercedes' DAS system. It was such a question mark after testing. No one really knew what it was supposed to do, and it turns out that what everyone thought it did in February is not what it does now, or is not what it was ever intended to do now. So it's interesting to see the difference there, and kind of how it basically allows the driver to alter setup during the lap is basically what Mercedes have said. That's the purpose of it. That's why we're using it. I don't think it's really making all that difference. Red Bull have one in the wings ready to go, so maybe they'll have that on the car this weekend, which will be interesting to see if it does actually make a difference, because I genuinely don't think it does. I think more in qualifying, maybe. But again, I just don't think there's that much lap time in it from what I understand. And to be fair, the Mercedes package is, like I say, so dominant and so strong. I think it would have been leading the pack anyway. If there is rain this weekend, it's going to be very interesting to see how it's different. I kind of wish they were doing something different. Like, this is the first time I'm having back-to-back races, so it's all a bit of an unknown area anyway. But we literally have the same tyres and the same track layout and the same things available, and no one apart from Ferrari really is going to bring any updates in a week. So nothing's really going to I don't think much is going to change in the pecking order or in the competitive order or at all, unless there's rain, in which case that will mix things up for sure. Haas and Alfa Romeo were right down the back, which I think has got something to do with the Ferrari power unit, sorry. There was a really interesting graphic that came out after the race that was showing the difference between the fastest lap set by each team last year compared to this year, and the 3 teams were down on their time from last year to this year, or pretty much down. Some were very marginally down a little bit, but not really enough to talk about. But Haas, Alfa and Ferrari were all, I think, over 0.4 off their time from last year, which is interesting because obviously Ferraris had this whole debacle about their power unit anyway prior to the season even starting, which was kind of through the winter start of the season, or what should have been the start of the season in February. So there's something about their power unit that's different this year than it was last year, and it really does seem to be hampering them. So whether they went a different route in developing their engine, and the FIA's basically said, look, you can't do it that way, that's against the rules. So they're having to kind of track back and try and refine the pace and performance they had in this illegal way, if you will. Very, very interesting to see how that will unfold, but at the moment it does seem to be hurting Alfa and Haas as well as Ferrari. I really do wonder if we'll have so many failures again this weekend. I don't know if it's just because some of the teams were rusty coming away from not having raced for a while, or some of the teams were, the cars were maybe not running enough, had been sat idle for a while, so the engines are kind of packed up. The Racing Points were puffy, very puffy engines. None of them gave. Actually, that's a lie. Stroll's car gave. So I don't know I don't think they should have been puffing. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we have so many retirements, mechanical failures. And I mean, Raikkonen's incident with the wheel gun mechanic is very, very adamant that the wheel was on. So I don't really know what happened there, because it does look like a clean wheel nut wasn't tight enough, tire fell off the car, wheel fell off the car, sorry. So that's what it looked like from an outsider's perspective, from seeing what I saw on the TV and the replays and such. So interesting to see what kind of comes of that investigation. As far as I'm aware, nothing's come out of that investigation as of today, which is Wednesday the 8th of July. We had a couple of tangles. The Sainz Vettel tangle on the instant I saw it happen, I actually put the blame on Sainz. Having watched the replays and the reflection, I think no further action racing was the correct way to go, because I think it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Vettel went for a very opportunistic move. Sainz was attacking Leclerc on the outside, which did leave the inside open. So the door was closing, yes, but Vettel took a gamble that didn't pay off. So, I mean, I personally would call it splitsies. I'm not sure, people will disagree with me probably on that one, but initially I thought it was Sainz's fault. But on reflection, yeah, racing incident, no further action was the right way to go with that one, in my opinion. The Albon Hamilton incident, again, I think that was bang on correct. You know, Hamilton is a very Senna-esque driver. He's very much of the mentality of, I'm going to put my car here, and if you put your car here too, or try and overtake me, and you don't yield, we're probably going to crash. Which was it's a very aggressive way of driving. Hamilton drives like that. Verstappen also drives like that. And Senna obviously was notable for driving like that, which is probably where the pair of them get that kind of racing mentality and that racecraft from. But the problem is, if the other guy is already ahead, you have to yield. A very good reflection of this is if you look at the Norris-Leclerc overtake when Leclerc gets past Norris for 4th, just about 10 laps from the end, I think it was. They got very close, they got very racy, but there was a point where Leclerc was ahead and Norris yielded that position because he knew he was behind and had to yield or they would have crashed. And that's how you do it. The argument saying, where could Hamilton have gone? Well, he could have yielded. And that's the difference to me. Hamilton kept on the edge, too far on the edge in my opinion, because he left no space for Albon at all on the track, and that's partially why they came together, because Albon was probably trying to avoid the gravel, get back on the track, and Hamilton just left him no space. So I definitely think that was correct to give him that 5th place, and I wouldn't defend Hamilton's moving there at all. I'd say that Hamilton should have yielded that position when it was apparent that he wasn't ahead anymore. And the fact of the matter is his front tyre caught Albon's rear tyre, which means Albon was very much ahead of that Mercedes. Correct penalty dishing out from the FIA for once, or the race stewards. We know how varied that can be in the past, so it was good to see them kind of consistent and not pushing any of those really important decisions till the after the race, because they're always a bit of a pain when you have to wait till post race, and sometimes podiums can shift. And you know, it happened in Brazil, very similar incident between Albon and Hamilton, and they waited till after that race, quite a long time after that race, to give Hamilton the penalty, which meant that Sainz lost out on his first Formula 1 podium. So far, it's good to see them making quick decisions. Looking ahead to the next weekend, like I said earlier, I don't really think we're going to have much different, unless it rains. Rain is, I'm kind of doing a rain dance. From my last check, we should have rain on Saturday, but not on Sunday, which is not ideal. I prefer to have a wet race, because it just keeps things mixed up a little bit, especially when the tyre compounds are staying the same, the track layout is staying the same. The next doubleheader we have is Silverstone, which is doing different tyre compounds, but I really, for the 70th anniversary, I really wish they would run the old layout, cut out Village section and run the old track there. Start on National Straight rather than International Straight, and basically run a really old school race and kind of reflecting the track as it pretty much was 70 years ago. I think that would be really cool, and that would be a really cool nod for the 70th anniversary of Formula 1 on the weekend that it started at Silverstone. Just really like bring the history back. So I do kind of wish they do that, but from what I've heard, they have no intentions of actually running the old circuit. Curbs was a massive discussion point this weekend. A lot of drivers suffered issues throughout the weekend because they were running quite heavily on the curbs. So teams and drivers are already going to be trying to avoid those prior to even starting practice on Friday. So with those kind of things in mind, that's why I want the rain, because it'll be different. And I'm worried that if we don't have so many fall off again this weekend, then it's going to be a little bit processional, a little bit uninteresting. I hope not. I hope the racing's still keen. I mean, you've still got that battle between Racing Point and McLaren, which I do think is going to be super tight throughout the season. The one thing I can't sign off without talking about today is the announcement, but it was confirmed today that Fernando Alonso is returning to Formula 1 with Renault. Now, I am quite disappointed with this news. Quite frankly, the F2 grid this year is super strong. There's a lot of good names in there. There's a lot of great talent in there. And there's a lot of young guns who a Renault seat like that would have been perfect. Good entry point for them. Good midfield car. Good way to come into the sport. It's a decent seat for a young rookie to come into. So to see what I'm calling a Formula One has-been return is very disappointing. I'm disappointed in Renault. I don't have a clue how much this has cost them. But granted, to get someone like Alonso in your car, it's not going to be cheap. So it's a big payout. I can't really work out why Alonso's done it, because when he left the sport in 2018, he always said he'd only come back if it was for a front-running car, for a race-winning car, for a championship challenging car. Quite frankly, with the regs not changing next year, this Renault is going to be nowhere more competitive than it is now. And right now, it's, you know, it's sitting pretty in 6th on the pecking order. It's not going to be winning races. It's certainly not going to be winning championships. So I can't fathom the logic from what he said in 2018. I can't fathom why he's coming back. I mean, the other talking point that's come out is Vettel rumours back to Red Bull are quite heavy at the moment, and that's another disappointing one for me, because that just means Red Bull are putting Albon back down into AlphaTauri, and that, to me, I struggle with this. I really struggle with this because, you know, these guys at the front are, you know, they're in very good cars for very good reasons. They've driven very well. They are world champion-esque, and they are world champions. So don't get me wrong, they're not bad drivers, but at some point the sport has to move forwards, not backwards. And especially with a team like Red Bull, they're very, very good at just demoting and promoting drivers without even considering it. And to be fair, Albon did a really great race this weekend. He was racing really well towards the end of last year. So to have another older driver kind of demoting a young driver, it's frustrating. And I kind of want to start to see the sport moving forwards rather than back. They're kind of trying to hang on to some glory days, maybe. I don't know what Alonso's going to do in that car apart from moan. F2 is going to be a great one to watch this year, and I am going to be watching that one as much as I can to make sure I keep an eye on that, because there's especially with the Alfa Romeo seats and Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott as well. There's 5 Ferrari young drivers there, and potentially 2 Alfa Romeo seats as of the end of this year. And depending on their pace will depend on whether Kimi stays or goes. I can't see Giovinazzi staying past the end of this season, just because he's been in that car now 2 years. He just hasn't really done a lot to show for it, in my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. So I just think if Ferrari have got more than one young gun ready to go, they're going to be wanting to put them into that kind of Ferrari B team, as it's referred to quite heavily, rather than sticking out with someone that they potentially don't see ending up in their top tier team. But there we go. They are my first thoughts of F1 2020 as it has returned. Hallelujah. If you have any thoughts on what I've said today, or any comments or opinions of your own, please leave them down in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to discuss this with you at further length. But anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been an absolute blast as always. If you enjoyed this video, go show that like button some Formula One love. And if you want to support the channel, go hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss next time I upload a video. Stay awesome, and I will see you all in the next video! The day has come where I officially will not be supporting Fernando Alonso when he's in Formula One, and I never thought that day would come.